Sean Combs, known as P Diddy, has been behind bars since September after being criminally charged with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution. The music mogul has now got a trial set for May next year, where he has denied all the charges laid against him. But this seems to be just the beginning, as P Diddy has, before and after these federal investigations led to his arrest, the rapper now has numerous criminal allegations made against him that stem from rape to abuse to molesting a 16-year-old boy. Joining me now for an update on this ongoing situation is attorney Lisa Bloom, who represents one of the alleged victims of P Diddy, singer Dawn Richard. Lisa, thank you so much for your time today. For anyone who's just, tuning into what's been happening or a little confused as to why this is such an ongoing thing, can you explain the separate cases going on, what the federal case against Diddy is, coupled with your client's allegations and any other lawsuits that have come outside of that?
Sure. So thank you for having me. I'm very proud to represent Dawn Richard. She is a singer. She's currently on tour. She's a very successful recording artist with millions of followers on social media. And she worked with Diddy since 2004 on the TV show Making the Band, in the band called Danity Kane, and in the band called Diddy Dirty Money. And she alleges a horrifying series of events of sexual harassment, sexual assault, sex trafficking, false imprisonment, essentially that she was threatened. She witnessed incidents of abuse against Cassie Ventura and others. And she has come forward, and I'm very proud to represent her. We filed her civil case over a month ago before the federal criminal case. The federal criminal case came after ours, but it was strikingly similar. Many of the same allegations that women were victimized, that they were terrorized, that they weren't even paid properly when they worked for him and made music with him. So there's the federal criminal case. That's why he's in prison right now. And I think he's going to be in prison for the rest of his life. And then there's a large number of civil cases that have been filed. Those are private lawsuits for money damages. There's my case, and there's a number of other cases with similar allegations, some involving underage people as well as adults who were victimized by him. In our case, and in the federal criminal case, we're not just against Sean Combs, but against a large number of people who are accused of being his enablers, because we know from history, people like Jeffrey Epstein, I represented 11 of his victims. These guys don't just do this by themselves. They have to have a large number of people who are complicit in order to have an operation this big and to have this many accusers.
And Lisa, he is currently behind bars after being denied bail in that early pre-trial last month. Can you explain why such a high-profile person managed to have the judge deny his bail?
Yes, and that is very unusual. And here's why. And it has to do with my case, because the prosecutors say he was tampering with witnesses before he was sent to jail. In my case, there's a woman, only one, who came out publicly after we filed our complaint and basically attacked my client and said she was a liar. Well, it turns out, the prosecutors say, that there were over 100 phone messages between Sean Combs and this witness right after the filing of our complaint until a couple of days later when she came out with her statements calling my client a liar. And then those calls stopped. So the implication is very clear that he was reaching out to her. I don't know if he offered her something or if he scared her or what happened, but that he's tampering with witnesses. And the judge essentially said he needs to be behind bars because we can't have witnesses tampered with.
And during a lot of these allegations, Lisa, including your client, which we'll get into down the track, is the language that P Diddy allegedly used when kind of trying to intimidate alleged victims. So the fact that he has that kind of against him and then being told that he could be tampering with witnesses go hand in hand, and what these people are alleging in the first place. But I want to get into the allegations of these freak-offs that you and I have spoken about before, but they're all over headlines, that P. Diddy allegedly orchestrated these sex parties, these freak-offs. But can you walk me through what the illegal aspect of these activities allege, as opposed to, consensual sex parties that one might throw?
Sure. And you put your finger right on it, because the issue is consent, right? You can have a big party. People can have sexual activity, even at a party. That's certainly not for everyone, but that's not illegal. What is illegal is drugging people. That's alleged. People being forced to have sex against their will, people being exploited, people being pressured into it. For example, you're not going to get a recording contract, or I'm not going to continue working with you, supporting your music, unless you engage in this sexual activity. That is clearly illegal. And that's part of the sex trafficking. You know, we think of sex trafficking as moving a person from here to there, and that is one kind of sex trafficking. But another kind of sex trafficking is the commercial exploitation of people for the purposes of sex. And that's what's alleged in the government's criminal complaint, and that's also alleged in my civil complaint on behalf of Don Richard, that economic exploitation. Don't forget, you know, Sean Combs was really at the top of the hierarchy in the music industry. He could make or break careers. He literally had TV shows about how he was making or breaking people's careers. So who wants to turn against him? Who wants to stand up against him? If you're going to do that, you have a very legitimate fear that you're not going to have a career. And that's why this went on for so long.
Lisa, this power imbalance with these victims, this kind of grooming aspect, do you see any similarities with this case with P Diddy to what went on with Harvey Weinstein?
Absolutely. I mean, we see this over and over again. And, you know, I mentioned Jeffrey Epstein, which I think is also a very good example. We know that Ghislaine Maxwell, his madam, was brought to justice for being his number two, for bringing women in for the purposes of his sexual exploitation. I, again, represented 11 of those victims. And here with P. Diddy, there's no way he could have done this alone. And there are women, just like in the Jeffrey Epstein case, at the highest levels who are accused of bringing women and girls to him, because women will inherently trust other women in a way that we probably won't with men that we don't know. So that's a very kind of disappointing and heartbreaking part of the story. But lots and lots of other people, high-ranking people in the music industry who knew, we allege, who turned a blind eye, who saw what was happening, but who were making so much money, they just didn't do anything to help the victims.
Lisa, earlier this week on Monday, 6 new sexual abuse lawsuits were filed in Manhattan, which is the first of many that is expected to be filed in the next few weeks. All cases filed under the anonymous Jane and John Doe pseudonyms. Can you walk me through what's happened here?
Yes. So there are more lawsuits being filed all of the time on behalf of people who were adults or who were underage, who allege that they were sexually abused either by Sean Combs or by people at his direction. You know, one of the allegations is that at these freak off parties that you mentioned, that male sex workers are brought in and then women who work for Diddy are forced to have sex with them while other people are watching, while Diddy is watching for his sexual gratification. And that's part of these lawsuits. We do expect more lawsuits to file. I'm talking to people all the time. I think a lot of people are coming forward now because they see the courage of people like my client, Don Richard, and others, and they say, it's time, you know, it's time for me to break out of the secrecy and the silence that I've lived with for so many years. I'm going to come forward and seek justice. And it's still a very brave, courageous thing to do. There are still a lot of powerful people in the music industry who were associated with Diddy. So people are still very scared, and I admire their courage in coming forward.
Absolutely. And those lawyers representing those 6 victims from this week say that they're representing at least 120 victims of P. Diddy's. But when they came out and said that, of course, Diddy's defense team have said that this was only attributed to the fact that they put out a 1-800 number and that just garnered publicity. What do you take from comments like that? Do you find that you have 120 credible witnesses, or does putting out a 1-800 number like that actually kind of do an injustice to those victims?
I don't see any problem with putting out an 800 number. It is very hard for victims to come forward. I've been representing victims of discrimination, harassment, and abuse since 1986, and each and every one of them is terrified. They're scared. They don't know what to do. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't know who to reach out to. And making it easier for victims to come forward is a good thing. Look, everybody still has to prove their case. They still have the burden of proof in court. They have to come forward. Their testimony is evidence. They may have witnesses. They may have photos. They may have videos. They may have text messages. So they still have to prove their case. But I say open the courthouse doors, let people come forward and let them prove their case. And I salute all of the victims who have come forward.
One of the lawsuits filed during this week alleges that Diddy violently raped a woman in 1995 and said, you better not tell anyone about this or you will disappear. This threat, this language allegedly used, how similar is it to anything that your client, Dawn Richard, experienced?
It's very similar to what's alleged in my complaint for Dawn Richard. Threats of violence, threat that you will disappear, that your family members will be hurt, that you'll never have a career. I mean, we all saw that horrific video of Sean Combs beating his girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, in a hotel hallway, kicking her when she was down on the ground, dragging her back into the freak off because she had the temerity to want to leave. If he would do that in the public area of a hotel hallway, we can only imagine what he would do behind closed doors. And the fact that so many people have come forward with these strikingly similar allegations about violence, about threats of violence, I think shows that there's a lot of credibility to these claims.
And Dawn Richard, as you mentioned earlier, she came out with these allegations. Subsequently, the lawsuit filed by you as her attorney before this federal investigation came out, and then subsequently multiple other women have come forward, plus that federal investigation resulting in P Diddy being arrested. How is Miss Richard feeling in what could only be described as a domino effect following her public bravery?
Well, we are very encouraged by all of the victims coming forward. Everyone stands on the shoulders of those who came before her. In our complaint, Dawn talks about the courage of Cassie Ventura, who was the first, who came forward about a year ago. She filed her complaint with very detailed allegations of the brutal beatings that she alleges that she suffered at the hands of Sean Combs. That case was settled the next day, but the public lawsuit is out there for anyone to read. And that was an inspiration to Dawn. And if she has inspired others, we are very moved by that. In terms of how she's doing, it's a tough time. It's painful. You know, this is the last thing she wants. She's a beautiful musical artist. She just wants to make her music. That's her life. She's going on tour right now. And she asked me, Lisa, should I cancel the tour? I said, absolutely not. Do the tour. Your fans want to hear your music. I'm sure it'll be very therapeutic for you to do your music, but it's difficult. But underneath the fear for her is a lot of strength. Dawn is a very strong woman. I think she can do this. I think she's going to go forward. It's just one day at a time for her. You know, there's a lot of online hate. There's still a lot of people who love Diddy, who support him, who will be attacking the victims online. But there's also a lot of support, and we really appreciate that.
Do you see a world in which this rapper gets off scot-free? Because you can understand that when you have such a high-profile music mogul with all the money in the world and support from people, as you said, who are probably sending messages to Dawn along with other victims, is there a world where he gets off scot-free?
It is always possible. There are no guarantees in our legal system. I mean, look at Bill Cosby, who had over 60 accusers. I represented 4 women against him. He was criminally convicted after a very painful trial where his victims testified, including one of my clients. He was convicted, he went to prison, and then it was reversed on appeal. That happens. So there's no guarantee, but the more victims who come forward, I think the more strength there is with all of them.
Lisa Bloom, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Virgin Radio.